Okay, 6 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Roll call. The question tonight is, what was your favorite subject in school, excluding recess and lunch? So I'll start, Rick. History. Thomas.
Elementary school, I loved math, and then high school, more social studies.
Okay. Gerald.
History.
Rachel.
Science.
Ron.
Algebra.
Bruce.
Math is total math.
Cheryl.
Advanced biology.
That's biology. Okay, interesting mix there. We all ended up here. Okay, so all members are present and signed in. We have some additions to the agenda, which were sent out this morning, I believe.
Yes, there were a couple of coaching resignations that came in, and then I just forgot to add the teacher appreciation acknowledgement. I had talked about it at our last meeting, and then I sent the agenda and woke up at about 10 o'clock and went, ugh! So that was an added addition to the agenda, so I wanted to make sure that was on there.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No public comment? So we're on to the consent agenda.
Yep.
Janelle?
Do we want to do it? Cheryl, would you like to review bills?
I was able to go ahead and look at the bills. I noticed there was a bill for the Costa Rica trip. That must be upcoming.
So the German trip is coming this summer, and then the Costa Rica's after.
Okay,
Yep, German is going yet this June.
I guess that's why it jumped out at me then. And Chromebooks are being replaced, upgraded, whatever, as we do every year.
Yes.
Other than that, everything was normal business.
Sounds good. The rest of the personnel items, as I mentioned, there were a couple of coaching resignations that came in. Other than that, we have some positions that people have resigned, advisory roles. We've got some teacher movement. Ms. Eisenbraun is an elementary or the preschool special education teacher. But other than that, pretty standard kind of this time of year, we've got some movement taking place. You'll also notice the proposed community ed pay scale, just a reminder that happens annually at this time of the year. And then there's a projection for summer pause hours. Those always vary just a little bit, but it's they're pretty consistent year over year. So those are the consent agenda items. In donations, I will just call out that we received from the Paynesville Recovery Center, the Paynesville High School Choir received a donation from a concert that was done. So an acknowledgement of that donation in the consent agenda as well.
Okay, Janelle recommends that we approve of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Make the motion accepted.
Second?
I'll second.
Rachel? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to communication item with our superintendent.
All right, so in my administrative report, I'm gonna, before I cast that, I'm gonna just click on the first link. As this month was May Teacher Appreciation Month, and you're going to see, well, there's 2 different weeks, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later on in the agenda. But I wanna just take a minute to, if you've not seen, if some of you may have seen this, if you haven't, it is definitely worth just taking a moment. So I'm gonna pause this so I can get it casted and share my tab. And
Wait, commercial anyways.
good call, good call. All right, now, pretty soon we'll skip the ad.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me though was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me, and I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "Now, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." And from that moment on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
So I don't know if you've seen this. I've seen this a ton of times, and every time I see it, it brings me back to the moment of why our teachers are so important and how they see things in kids that sometimes other people don't see. And it's such a gift. And so I just wanted to add just an extra little moment of appreciation and gratitude for our teaching staff, because they don't, I think, sometimes get the recognition for the moments that they create for kids. And so just an added note that we appreciate the moments that they create for kids. So that's my teacher appreciation notice for my report. The other piece that I want to come back and just spend a couple of minutes talking about, and I'm not gonna spend an extensive amount of time, but I have talked a lot at this table about the legislative session, and the legislative session did conclude on Monday. And there are a lot of financial implications for the school district in a positive way, and there are a lot of policy implications and mandates that are going to tie up some of that funding in the long run as well. So I just want to kind of walk through a few of those highlights for you. I am going to cast this or just share this tab as well so that people can kind of see what I'm talking through. And if there are, like I said, I'm not going to spend an extensive amount of time, and it's not comprehensive. There are more details than this, but these are just some of the highlighted areas. So we talk a lot about the funding formula and the percentage on the formula. This year, there is a 4% increase in the first year of the biennium and a 2% increase in year two. What's equally as the 4% is great. That's probably more than school districts have seen for a number of years. The 2% is pretty standard. We've heard that over the course of years. It's been 2.5, 2.48%. So that's a little bit more standard. One of the big changes that's taken place is beginning in fiscal year 26, the formula is indexed to inflation with a minimum of 2% and a maximum of 3%. So I think when people heard indexed to inflation, knowing kind of what our inflationary numbers have been, there was maybe a little bit of panic thinking, oh my gosh, how are we gonna pay for this? But the max ceiling is at 3%. So it provides some consistency and predictability in funding, which if you think back to how we've talked at this table about budgeting, there's been just some unknown variables, especially as we come into that, the funding years of the legislature, trying to predict what that funding will be. Now we have our minimum and our maximum. There is an increased funding toward the special education and EL cross subsidy. I'm not sure what the timing of that is. Special education funding is often delayed, and I've not yet heard where that funding is going to come into the district, if that will be with our regular flow of revenue, or if that's more in alignment with the special education funding flow. So more to come on that. There were some changes to compensatory revenue, and this is one of those things where there were some now kind of restrictions. So there are some changes where the funding has to be spent in the same site where it is received. So if the majority of our compensatory revenue, and I haven't tracked yet where it's coming in, but if the majority of our revenue comes in at the elementary, the majority of that expenditure needs to align at the elementary as well to 80%. So that was a change, because in the past, there was a set criteria of what we could use the revenue for, but it had not been localized to where the revenue came from. So that's a change for us. There are some requirements for paraprofessional training. There is an allocation of reimbursement for that. So that will be for the training requirements. It should be a cost neutral venture for us. It'll just be a delay in the funding versus the reimbursement. There's extensive conversation about the READ Act this year. So I've talked to the board a lot about the letters training and the initiative that's taken place through our elementary and letters is really about the science of reading. And it's the READ Act really does support a lot of the work that our elementary teachers and our secondary English language arts teachers have been doing. There is some increased funding for curriculum that supports and aligns to the science of reading, and it's an evidence-based curriculum. So I'm excited to see what that looks like and how that can help support our district as well. There are some screening requirements that come in for all kindergarten through third grade. One of probably the biggest changes within the READ Act that I want to kind of call out is that this kind of replaces what used to be called the Read Well by Third Grade initiative. So if you have kind of paid attention, there was that third grade mile marker of our students reading at grade level. One of the things that happens here with the READ Act is that we have to measure every grade level and determine each grade level if the student is reading at grade level instead of a third grade mile marker, okay? So there are some changes that come with that. Again, I'm really excited for where our district is in this process because I think we're sitting in a really good position to meet these requirements very, very quickly and very easily. So I think that's been a lot of the good work that's happened. There is some increased voluntary pre-kindergarten and school readiness funding. I don't yet know what that means for our district, whether or not we did submit an application, and I have not yet heard whether or not we are approved for seats or not. So more to come on that. There are a number of academic standard revisions. One of the things that we've talked somewhat at this table about is some of the high school requirements. One of the things that is in the requirement is a financial literacy. Kids are required to have a course in financial literacy budgeting before they graduate. There are some different alignments of the science credits, the math credits, the numbers, the electives, social studies standards are different. We're looking at how those are all going to come in and impact the district. Some of those are on a staggered implementation, so more to come on that, and I'll bring those forward when I have a little bit more information about those. There were some changes to PELRA, which is the Public Employee Labor Relations Act. So PELRA is the act that governs our negotiations and bargaining, and kind of the public employee portion of our our contract negotiations. So as we work through negotiations this year, we'll start looking at some of that language that we need to be looking at that we previously have not had to look at. There is unemployment for hourly unlicensed school employees. So this is something that I was watching throughout the course of the legislative session. Initially, this came through with funding to offset it. And then about 3 weeks ago, that funding was removed from all of the documents, and there was a really significant panic on school district parts to say, how are we gonna fund this? I mean, this takes effect as of May 28th. Well, you all know our budgets are set through June 30th. We didn't have any of that money budgeted. And the legislature did come through with $135 million in one-time funding. When it's gone, and then it becomes part of the school district's responsibility. So we certainly are keeping track of that and we'll budget for that in the upcoming years. But there is some money that was allocated into the bill, kind of a last minute addition, which we were grateful for. Paid family medical leave. That did go through as well. One of the things that we just need to be aware of there is that will be paid for and funded by a payroll tax. It does not come into effect until January of 2026. So over the course of the next year and a half, we'll be kind of planning how that's gonna look, what that impact is. The payroll tax is a 0.7% of a salary, so it will be different for every employee, obviously. Based on salary. So those are a couple of the big highlighted areas. Does anybody have any questions about any of I'll do the best I can with some of my summary information to get some information if you have questions.
Do we have any idea how long that 135 million, was that cover, that's every school in the state, so.
That's every school in the state.
Is that gonna last a year or 2 years or?
My prediction is that it's not gonna last a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do we have any idea what that's gonna cost us?
I'm gonna glance over at Carrie. We did do the calculation. It was about $145,000 for
A
the
year.
summer.
Okay.
And, I think to me, as much as the funding, how is it gonna work with staffing in the summer months for those that can now collect unemployment or work for pause or other options with the district?
Yep.
And that's as much of I can't assume that number is extremely large, but.
And that's something that, so Chris O'Brien and I have been talking about, trying to understand or see if that would impact our staffing at all. It certainly is something we're worried about. And, for our district, we haven't had the extensive summer programming from a summer school perspective, and some districts have really extensive targeted services programs that they offer over the course of the summer. And in the conversation that I've been having with those superintendents, they are absolutely facing staffing issues. And so it's certainly something we're paying attention to because it's something new that we have to navigate, and we'll figure it out. But we're gonna just see how long the funding lasts and see what the impact is. In the language, there is a requirement so this is, I believe that this is managed by DEED, the Department of Economic, DEED. I'm gonna have to look up what it is and then I'll come back, but.
Department of Economic and Employment, something.
Yes. It is so they really they also govern the unemployment for every other entity. So the processes are established, but they are saying that between DEED and the Department of Education, they have to do a joint report to the legislature about the impacts of this legislation. So I don't know if that will change anything, but they are required to report what the impact is about the legislation. Any other questions on that?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Okay.
All I heard for 12 years or 10 years going to the convention down there or the conference was this trifecta where one party was gonna be in power and we were supposed to get some nice funding. And I attended their stuff, and I think I told everybody before, we needed 7.5 to get ourselves back on track, where we can actually grow with stuff. Not be having a budget where every time we lose an expense, we're just trying to figure out how to fill it in. I don't think that's the way you make it grow. They asked for a 5 and a 5 and we got a 4 and a 2. Okay, you know something, I just not much in that, so it depends upon what the politicians say when they're running compared to what they do. And obviously, they didn't do it here. Had all that extra money, they have 2 responsibilities in the state, take care of our highways and make sure our education is up to snuff. And I don't know where all the money went, but it's irritating to me, just.
We're gonna see how, the special education cross-subsidy funding, that is an important funding mechanism for our school district. So when I know more about what that looks like and timing wise and how that comes into the district, I will share that out as well, because that's money that we've had mandated costs there. We've been asking for that funding year over year as well. And so that money did come through because that has come out of our general fund. So in the future, I'm hopeful that we can feel a little bit of forward momentum instead of looking at deficit spending. But I'm still gonna be cautious and hesitant as we just wait and see how it actually settles in.
Yeah.
So then I also included the revenue and expenditure report. So if you take a look at the revenue, really at this time of year, and I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger just so I can read it better, because I can't, sitting back here, I have a hard time looking at the little percentages. Really what I wanna kind of draw your attention to are these 3 columns today. So we are now reviewing the April 30th timeline. So if you look at from the 2021 and the 21-22, you'll see the percentage of where we are. So we're at about 85.56% of our revenues that have come into the district so far, which is just a little bit below where we have been in the previous 2 years, okay? So I think that's a kind of where I'm looking at wrapping up the school year. That's kind of what I have really honed in on in this last month. Similarly, and I look at that, again, you can look at the breakdown in the way that these funds are, whether it's through the general fund, whether you're following food service, community ed, operating capital, you can look at the two different funding tables. I also did the same for the expenditures and kind of looked at where that is. So I'm gonna make that one just a little bit bigger too. And scroll over. So again, this first chart, you can see how the expenditures are broken out. They're broken out by the object series. The next chart, they're broken out by program. But if you kind of come over and take a look at the 3 years over year, so we are in 22-23, so we're at about 71.35% of our expenditures that have taken place, which is just slightly below the previous 2 school years. So we're really sitting in a pretty solid track from a revenue and expenditure year over year, which I think is, again, that's one of the things that we've kind of been trying to track with these documents, is seeing how we are doing longitudinally over the course of a couple of years. Any questions on those? If not, I'll move on to committee and organizational reports. Does anybody have any committee information they would like to share? The staff development committee met.
Staff development committee met, had some nice conversations around kind of what they're looking at for teacher education through next summer, and kind of how we're gonna do with the new schedule, the 2-hour late starts versus the regular full days. And it was just I thought genuinely a good conversation amongst everybody, and it took a little while to get started, I think, by the time we kind of get ideas moving around, but then I felt like you guys all came to good conclusions.
We've had, Rick, do you want to just kind of give a general, we've started some negotiating with different groups. Do you want to give just a real broad overview of?
Yes, we've met now twice with the custodians. Once with somebody, no.
Food service.
Nobody.
Once with food
It was-
service.
Oh, yeah, we
once
met with food
teachers.
service. Teachers was postponed, and paraprofessionals is scheduled, so.
Yep.
We started the journey.
I'd say the continuing education met too.
Yep.
Everything seems to be in line on that one.
And that was the last meeting of the school year, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yesterday was, yep.
Yeah, for the West Central Education District, because we had our last meeting for this school year. I know they had a graduation on Monday. We didn't have anyone from Paynesville graduating from, I was at Sauk Center, so I think everything then next year would then be moving to Melrose.
Yep.
Is that, it's not shutting down, it's just that they're relocating a large portion of that. There is funding to do the renovation for their center up there, which is very exciting, so. I know that Janelle and I had a chance at the beginning when I first came onto that, as far as that committee, to walk through the building that they have. So I think a lot of exciting things going on with that.
Well, the facilities subcommittee met too.
Yes. Yep.
And it looks like we might be looking at a whole different direction for some of the things. So
Well, and,
still our discussion.
yep, Ken and I had a follow-up with him, to learn a little bit more about the rationale and where that came from. And so, the subgroup does continue to meet, and we'll come back together after I met with, Safe Engineering. All right, student representatives. It's our last senior board meeting.
Sad day.
Sad day.
Oh, no, she's on for another year, she has to come back.
Yeah.
yeah.
You didn't know about that?
Yeah.
Forgot to mention that.
That's on the agenda for tonight.
That was
Yeah.
So sad, we have update coming up June 2nd, and then we recently had our 8th grade orientation, which is kind of like a lunch potluck thing that we do with them and just tell them what they have to do to be able to be part of SAD and just kind of tell them what it's all about. That's pretty much it what's going on in SAD. And then sports, track, baseball, and golf, and softball just had their last game. Those are the sports all going on right now, and they're probably going to be, I think they're all coming to an end soon with the school year coming to an end as well.
So student council, we have fun in the Sunday tomorrow, so we're getting ready for that. We elected the new president, which is Katie Good, and we haven't done any other officer positions yet, but our next board member, guess what the last name is? Gutwald. It's Maggie Gutwald.
Okay.
Which is Alyssa's younger sister,
My
also
cousin.
cousins with Anna. So she's gonna be so good, she's really good. So she's the new officer or position for that. And then NHS, we've been doing a lot of stuff. We had the activities fair, which was actually really a big success. We set up in the gym, every club we reached out, and then if they wanted to put a representative up to let all the incoming 8th graders sign up for what they were interested in. It was really successful, and people were getting 20 names on a list. Obviously that not every single one of them was signed up, but it was just good to see what's out there. And we elected our new board too, and that our president for that is Josiah Utch. And then vice president's Owen Brick, and they have a lot of plans. It was good today. We had our meeting in here to we kind of all met up and just last year we didn't have a big foundation, so we talked about everything we've done. We wrote it down on a document so they can take that, at least they know, because it was kind of a rocky transition last year. So we told them all our duties so hopefully that'll be smooth. Graduation's coming up on June 4th. And we had our Dollars for Scholars banquet kind of thing. It was pretty cool. It was at Bug Beehive. We there were some representatives that gave out scholarships. It was nice to talk to them. I got to talk to some people I don't know, it's just cool. And then Sunday we had the baccalaureate, which was at 4. That was really cool. And then we had our honors banquet after that, which was nice. So yeah, today seniors all wore where they're going to school. Tomorrow's our last day.
Well, thank you for your time with the board, and we appreciate hearing your perspective and having you share out some of the different activities that are going on. So we wish you the best and congratulations on your upcoming graduation.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we move on. There's no old business? New business. We start with policy review. Policy committee did meet on April 24th, and this will just be the first reading, so we're not approving this tonight, but any,
So I will just, if the policy committee would like me to, I can just walk through what
Yeah.
each of these are, okay? So the first policy that was reviewed was protection and privacy of pupil records. So again, just kind of from a process perspective, many, if not all of our policies, and I will say the majority, and I always call out if it's different than MSBA's. But the Minnesota School Board Association really does a very solid service for school districts in the sense that they review model policy and have their legal counsel really vet it out with statutory changes and language. And so what a lot of the policy committee does is review the current policy to see how it aligns with MSBA and if there are things that are different that we need to bring up to speed. So you'll see that in policy 515, the recommended changes are spelling out sections and statutes, and there's an additional section. All of that again aligns with MSBA's recommendations. Policy 516, student medication, again, the changes were minor statute verbiage changes. And those are things, again, that come out when MSBA reviews the changes in legislation to our existing policies. Policy 520, student surveys. You'll see a couple of the notices, and again, this has been a policy that has been reviewed over the course of the last couple of years. There is a form that goes with the policy so that if we have families that want to opt out from any policy distribution, they are able to do so. 521 is student disability non-discrimination. The recommended changes there are again minor statute verbiage changes, and there's a legal cross-reference. In those policies, you'll notice what happens is they try to make a reference to where the law identifies why the policy is necessary or what the language is required, and so that's that cross-reference identified for you. Policy 522, the Title IX sex discrimination policy and grievance procedure. So I want to spend just a minute talking about this because I think that there was a change to this policy, a very substantial change to this policy within the last 3 to 5 years. And when we looked at it as a committee, there were two different, there was an old version and a new version. And what we wanted to do is just make sure that we were crystal clear that the policy that is adopted is in alignment with the law changes to Title IX, the Title IX non-discrimination procedures, and it identifies our people that are in alignment with our handbook. So the changes, again, you're going to see a lot, and I'm going to just click on this one so that you can actually see, because you're going to see a number of strike-throughs and changes. But that was because we found two different versions of the policy. However, the MSBA policy is the policy that we had in place. It just wasn't on the website. And so what we did is we brought the MSBA changes into this policy. So that's why you're gonna see those. If you go back to the MSBA policy, there are minor changes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then the last one is the use of peace officers and a crisis team for students with IEPs from school grounds. Anytime that we are working with a student with a disability, is a greater threshold of reporting that's necessary. I would say So in my previous role as a director, I worked with this much more closely because I had students that had really high needs within the setting for programs. And we interacted with law enforcement a lot more frequently. In our school district, it has not been nearly as pertinent. But the language that's in here it's all very consistent with MSBA and it's not been a service that we've really had to use, to support our students with disabilities. And then policy 533, we had some conversation about this policy. And we talked a little bit about where the policy came from, and what we determined is that this is a policy that originally came into fruition when we had funding that came through our health insurance plan that had like a wellness incentives, okay? So, but we decided to make the revisions and bring that back to the forefront, and reviewed the policy and made the recommendations based on MSBA's model changes. Policy 516.5, so I wanna pause here for just a minute because, so when we reviewed this was before, so again, this meeting took place in April. And at that point in time, legislation hadn't kind of pushed its way all the way through. School districts are now required to have 2 doses of essentially an overdose medication. But the policy language that was presented, that was reviewed, did not contain, it was not congruent with the legislation. The policy committee decided at this moment in time not to do anything with this policy until the legislation vets its way through, and then we know exactly what that language needs to look like for our policy. So I expect this to come back to the next round of policy review in a different, or with some revisions. But that's why at this point in time, it wasn't adopted, and the committee was not ready to move that into our policy cycle. But now that the legislation is requiring that we have 2 doses, we're just gonna have to see what that looks like and how that influences the school district, so. Any questions about those policies for the committee or myself?
It says the planning team will select numerous naloxone storage locations within the school. If we only have to have 2 doses, how are we going to have several locations?
So are you looking at the existing policy? Right, so that's part of why the policy wasn't adopted, because we weren't even at that point in time sure if the district would have them.
Okay, so this isn't going to be adopted or voted on at this point.
Nope, so the new policy, so the committee determined to watch the legislation and MSBA to determine how this will ultimately change in the near future. So we are not making a recommendation that this policy be adopted. But because it was reviewed, we put it on the document for discussion because it was reviewed by the committee.
Okay, that wasn't clear.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Because if it wasn't clear, then other people were probably wondering too. Okay,
Okay, everybody, so that's just the first reading.
great.
Okay, that brings us to, B, Paynesville State High School League resolution for membership, which is an action we need to take each year. I guess my only question is, a couple of years ago, there was some controversy about they upped the fees quite substantially. Has that come down, or where are we at?
It's always been the same. It's been consistent. There hasn't been a change.
Okay,
There hasn't been a discussed change with the superintendent group or the activities directors.
okay. Anybody else have any questions about the resolution?
Just if we do not renew, then we can participate in the Minnesota State High School League
That is correct.
activities.
Right.
Yep.
So we'll need somebody introduce, okay.
I'll make a motion to introduce a resolution, to maintain our membership with Minnesota State High School League
Is that a
as
resolution?
presented.
I'll second that.
And Cheryl seconds, this will be a roll call vote.
Bruce,
Aye.
Ron,
Aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye,
Rachel. Aye. Thomas.
Aye.
Gerald.
Aye.
passes unanimously. We'll get that signed, I guess you already got,
Oh, yeah.
so I'll get my signature on it. Achievement and integration plan.
All right, so this plan is renewed, reviewed and renewed every 2 years. So Ms. Akerson and I review our data and we review our information along with the collaborative and submit the plan for review. And then MDE will give us feedback, and so you'll see the date of, I believe it's March 15th in here, so it was submitted initially to the Department of Education by March 15th. And then we go back and forth and we rewrite the goals the way they like to see the language, and we talk about if we're doing the activities and how they align. So there's not a lot of structural changes to this plan, but I will just kind of call out for new board members what it is. So we are a neighboring school district to Melrose, and they are our closest neighbor. And Melrose has some racially identified categories that they receive funding. And then as a neighboring school district, we're able to participate in that achievement and integration collaborative and draw in some additional funding. What we've done is we've been able to use our funding to and I'll walk through a little bit of what our specific goals are, but our funding has been able to be used for targeting our reading interventions for our students that are in our free and reduced category of student demographics. And you'll see that these member school districts are identified. They're, as part of a collaborative, we also do some racially diverse collaboration between school districts, student groups. So it's really about having opportunities to make sure that our students that are typically underperforming, which would have been in that free and reduced lunch population, we're increasing their achievement. And then we're also working on providing opportunities for collaboration and integration across those four member school districts.
I
Go
guess
ahead.
I have a question.
Yep.
I see Melrose Area School and Long Prairie Eagle they have RI, racially identified.
Yep.
Sauk Center and Belgrade, Bruton El Rosa have an A by them. What does that stand for?
Adjoining.
They're adjoining? Mm-hmm. So when they show their report, we are considered an A adjoining too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Just wanted to
Yeah,
understand that.
oh, that's a good question. And so this plan, like if you would look at the other member school districts, and we're kind of, it's the Lake Wobegon Consortium, I believe is what it's called. All of our plans are very similar. The groups that we focus on are different because our student needs are different. But so when you look at the plan input, this is done with, and I'll be honest, Cassie did a lot of this work with that group in having conversation about what worked, what didn't work. Some of the student activities, prior to COVID, we had the opportunity for students to get together in districts. I think it was once a month, we would do transportation, and all of that is covered by the collaborative, so it's not an additional cost to us. But when we weren't able to be joining through COVID, we did more virtual meets, and each district facilitates a different activity and has a chance for students to get together virtually, and then at the end of the school year, they get together one time per year. So it's really been kind of a nice opportunity to learn about different opportunities, different activities that are happening in our surrounding school districts. And really the intent is to provide some integration. So the focus of our goals have been our academic achievement, increasing the scores for our students that are in that free and reduced subcategory, so that we're increasing their reading and their math. We're taking a look at how they grow from the fall to the spring. So as we've talked about the world's best workforce and the growth of all of our student body, this really is in alignment. It's not intended to be a separate plan. It's intended to coordinate the work that we do and maximize the funding for the school district. So I'm not gonna kind of walk through each point, because that is here for you to take a look at. There is professional development for our staff. There is the time that we spend through our power half hour with our students and doing our focused work. And then there is that collaborative student opportunity to get together with those other school districts. Any questions on that? Again, if you look at this year over year, there's not a lot of extensive change. And so it's a pretty standard plan to what we've had in years past.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the Achievement Integration Plan?
So move.
Bruce moves second,
Also second.
Rachel second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. We go on to the Adult Basic Education Glacial Lakes Consortium.
Okay, so school districts are required to have an adult basic education program. We are part of the Glacial Lakes Consortium. You will see this is pretty consistent. I'm gonna pull this up and you can just do a quick peek at the member districts that are part of this. So it's ACGC, BBE, Buffalo Lake Hector, Mankato, Hutchinson, KMS, Litchfield, New London, Spicer, Paynesville, and Wilmer. So I think somebody had asked a question about like our adult classes and our GED and how that's offered. All of that comes through this consortium. And so when we have adults or this group has also worked on some EL classes. They would work on the programming and the staffing on our behalf. We might have a teacher who's here, but if that employment is kind of governed through this consortium, okay? This is an annual approval of this membership.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the Glacial Lakes Adult Basic Education?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Ron makes one second,
I'll second.
Cheryl seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Teacher Appreciation Week.
So this is just an informational acknowledgement. Again, when I sat here and talked about at the beginning, I think it was the last week, the business meeting in April, and I said, coming up in May is Teacher Appreciation Week. And I kind of went a little bit of panic because the governor declared the first week and then the National Foundation declared the second week. And I thought, well, is it the first week or the second week so we just spent a lot of time in May celebrating teachers. So I did want to make sure that we have the formal acknowledgement. You will see the governor's proclamation. And then that second document is the list of all of our certified teachers that are serving the Paynesville area schools. One thing I do want to just kind of take a second to acknowledge, and I didn't know how to put them on here, but we have a few substitutes that have really, they've been teachers who have retired. We have some subs who have just come in and spent a lot of hours in our classrooms. And I acknowledge the work that they do, but I didn't have a way to put them on and not miss somebody. So I really wanted to just also, in addition to our teachers, say thank you to our subs. So this is just an acknowledgement of Teacher Appreciation Week.
Okay. Upcoming meetings.
Okay. So you're going to start seeing lots of negotiation sessions. One thing just to be aware of, some of those are really fluid, dependent on what's happening with different language and if things are, if we're trying to pull information together. So we'll do the best we can to keep those updated. And board members, I will try to, if we have to make any changes to what's been published, I'll try to reach out and shoot you a text or send you an email. But just, we're gonna do the best we can to get those those put out is in a timely fashion.
Only thing I noticed is, we just did this yesterday, but custodial is also the
Custodial,
12th.
same
Yes.
day, and
So
food service.
we just decided that yesterday afternoon,
o'clock.
so.
Yes, we did.
Short timing to get it on the agenda, but just as a announcement to that.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, can we just talk about graduation for just a real quick second?
Sure can.
thing?
Yeah.
So graduation's the 4th, 2:00. We would like the board to be there. You got a notice today, by email, if you haven't seen it yet, that, David would like us to be here an hour early to hand out brochures, the programs. And then, we'll be seated up in the front. There'll be 4 of us on one side, and how many is that?
So there's five board members on one side
Yep.
and then
Two on
Two,
the other,
yeah.
so one.
Myself
And
and,
then, yeah.
and the question was asked, what should you wear? Well, wear something. I don't know, some of the kids may not under their robes, who knows what they'll come up with, but, we just said, it's a nice occasion, so dress accordingly.
certainly doesn't have to be formal, but be comfortable and
We're not outside, so we don't have to worry about
Right.
the heat had in previous.
But it might be warm in there with the amount of people that are supposed to be there, so.
but it is climate controlled.
Yes,
That is nice.
but I mean, temperature varies, so.
And two, we've not really had an opportunity for the board to get together for that formal picture, to update the picture. So we'll take that opportunity as well on that day, because everybody will be looking all dapper. Okay,
Okay, that,
I have one thing. So for us board members, we were invited to the FFA annual awards banquet. I also had the announcement of the new officers. Cheryl and I were both there for it. And one of the things that they did send to the school board was a certificate of appreciation. So this is from the FFA chapter here. So it was a very, very, I think, well-attended award ceremony, and it was very, very well put together. And
And an excellent potluck.
yeah, actually, yeah. So
all right, thank you.
go ahead. I had
can-
that for the school. I don't know who I give that to. I think.
I can hang that down in the district office,
all right.
yeah.
okay, any other business? We'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, stand up and leave.